It was a Saturday evening, the kind where the city dressed itself in golden streetlights and soft music leaking from restaurant doors. People were out celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, first dates, last chances, inside Maison Delacroix, one of the city's most talked about fine dining spots. Tables were already filling up. The clinking of crystal glasses, gentle laughter, and the rustling of linen napkins filled the air. The maitre d' stood tall behind the welcome stand, scanning the reservations list, adjusting his collar in the mirror behind him. Everything needed to feel exclusive. That's when the door opened slowly, almost hesitantly. A young man rolled in on a wheelchair, guided gently by a friend. He wore a navy sweater, clean but plain. No designer labels, no watch, no flash. The maitre d' looked up and blinked. The man in the wheelchair smiled politely. Reservation for 2, under Joshua Lang. The maitre d' hesitated, eyes flicking down the list. The name was there, but the hesitation lingered. "Yes, right," he said. "Well, get you seated in just a moment." He leaned over and whispered something to the host staff. A young waitress nearby watched, eyes narrowing slightly. The maitre d' gestured discreetly toward a far corner table and close to the kitchen doors and away from the windows. "Seat them over there," he murmured. "It's out of the way." The waitress gave a small shrug, then walked over. "This way, sir." As they rolled past the main floor, several heads turned. Some diners looked, then quickly looked away. Others held their gaze just long enough to make their judgment known. One teenage boy leaned over to his mother. "Why is someone like that here?" he whispered, a little too loud. She hushed him, but not without an awkward glance toward Joshua. At their table in the corner, the friend Ella helped Joshua slide forward slightly to reach the table edge more comfortably. "You okay?" he asked under his breath. Joshua gave a small nod. Used to it. They opened their menus. Moments passed. No server arrived. At the next table, a couple who had arrived after them was already sipping wine. Joshua looked around. Still no one. He caught sight of 2 servers at the bar, talking and laughing. One of them, a young man with slicked back hair and a silver name tag, Kyle, glanced toward them. Joshua raised his hand slightly. A calm, courteous gesture. Kyle looked at him, gave the smallest of smirks, and turned away. 10 more minutes passed before Kyle finally walked over. "Ready to order?" he asked, without making eye contact. Joshua smiled, trying not to let his voice sound tired. "Yes, I think we'll start with the wild mushroom risotto." And then Kyle interrupted. "That's out." Joshua blinked. "Oh, all right, then the duck can fit. Please," Kyle scribbled, barely nodding. He didn't offer any wine, didn't ask about allergies, didn't crack a smile. When he walked away, Eli leaned in again. "Want to go somewhere else?" "No," Joshua said quietly. "I want to see how this plays out." Meanwhile, back at the front, a small line had formed. Couples in cocktail attire, businessmen with sleek watches, laughter, perfume, tips. Kyle returned to the bar and whispered something to the bartender, glancing back toward Joshua's table. The bartender raised an eyebrow. "That's the table that reserved under Lang, yeah." Kyle muttered, "Looks like a sympathy dinner, probably scraping to pay the bill." The maitre d' chuckled from behind the podium. If he leaves a Yelp review, well survive. The meal came lukewarm. The duck was overcooked. No one asked how it was. No one offered dessert. When Joshua asked for the check, Kyle brought it without a word and placed it face down. Joshua turned it over, took out his card, then paused. He reached into his inner coat pocket and placed something next to the card. A business card. Kyle picked it up absently, then looked at it fully. His face went pale. It read, "Joshua Lang, Managing Director, Lang Equity Group, Majority Shareholder. Delacroix Dining Group Contact Private Line." His hands trembled slightly. From across the room, the maitre d' noticed and hurried over. "Is something wrong?" Kyle whispered, but it was too late. Joshua was already putting on his coat. The maitre d' forced a smile. "Sir, I hope everything was to your satisfaction." Joshua met his eyes calmly. I own this restaurant." The maitre d' froze. "And this isn't an inspection," Joshua added. "It's something more important." He nodded toward the staff. "It's a test." "One you just failed." The maitre d' stood frozen, his mouth half open. The words caught somewhere between panic and denial. Kyle still held the business card, as if hoping it might disappear if he stared long enough. The bartender stepped back, sensing a shift in the air, a subtle one but heavy, undeniable. Joshua looked at them one by one, not with anger, not even with disdain, just disappointment. "The worst part," Joshua said quietly, "is that I expected this." The maitre d' stammered. Sir, if we had known that I was rich," Joshua asked, his voice calm but sharp. "That I was important." He leaned forward slightly in his chair. "So you would have smiled wider, sat me closer to the windows, maybe offered me wine on the house." No one answered. Joshua glanced toward Eli, who sat beside him, silent but steady, as he had been through everything. He turned back to the staff. "I came here tonight not to be treated like a king," he said. "I came to see if your hospitality extended to people who didn't look like kings." He tapped the table gently. "Turns out it doesn't." A sudden silence swept through the room as more diners began to take notice. Whispers sparked. "Wasn't that the guy in the wheelchair? Why is the staff crowding him now? What's going on?" The manager, who had just arrived from the back office, pushed through the whispering staff and approached with a practiced corporate smile. "Mr. Lang." "What a surprise to see you here. We had no idea." Joshua raised a hand, gently cutting him off. "Save the welcome. I didn't come to be celebrated. I came to see what your people do when no one's watching." He turned to the maitre d'. "You're in charge here." The maitre d' nodded stiffly. "How long have you worked at this location?" "Almost 2 years," the man said, "with very good reviews." Joshua nodded slowly. "You're excellent at curating appearances," he said, "but not at cultivating character." At that moment, Kyle finally found his voice. "Sir." 2 was just following the seating chart. Its company policy to Joshua's eyes met his, firm but not cruel. "You weren't following policy. You were following bias." Kyle's mouth shut. Joshua continued, voice low and measured. "Your words, your tone, the way you looked at me not once as a customer, just as a burden." He gestured toward the table. This spot, tucked away near the kitchen, it wasn't about efficiency. It was about invisibility. The room was now fully quiet. Even the music seemed to retreat. Joshua took a breath, then said, "I used to walk into restaurants like this in suits and expensive shoes. Back then, no one ever made me wait. No one ever questioned my worth." His fingers lightly tapped the wheel of his chair. "But now that I enter differently, you treat me differently." The general manager cleared his throat. "Mr. Lang, I assure you, we take inclusivity and respect very seriously. This is an unfortunate one-off." Joshua turned sharply. "It's not a one-off. It's a culture." He looked around. "You train your staff how to serve, but not how to see. That's the problem." From the back, a quiet voice spoke up. It was Maria, a young busser who had watched everything from the sidelines. She stepped forward hesitantly. "I saw how they treated you," she said, "and I wanted to say something, but I was afraid I'd get in trouble." Joshua gave her a small nod. "You're not in trouble. You're a mirror, and I'm grateful for you." Then he turned back to the manager. "I won't cancel my investment. I don't make decisions out of spite, but I will make changes." He handed the manager a sealed envelope. "In here are 2 names, yours and the maitre d's. You're both stepping down." The men paled. Kyle tried to speak again. "Mr. Lang, please." Joshua handed another envelope to Maria. "This is for you," he said. "A full scholarship, hospitality school, and when you graduate, you'll manage this place better than anyone else ever did." Maria gasped. Her hands shook. Joshua glanced one last time at the maitre d'. "You wanted to hide me in the corner, but tonight, I was the one watching you. He turned to Eli, who silently wheeled his chair toward the front. They exited slowly, quietly, leaving behind a room full of silence and stunned eyes. Outside, the air was cool. Eli chuckled as they moved down the sidewalk. "You always did like dramatic exits," Joshua grinned. "Only when the entrance gets ignored." That night, after Joshua Lang left the restaurant, Maison Delacroix didn't quite return to normal. The rest of dinner service continued, but hollow. The maitre d' lingered in the hallway, his nameplate now slightly tilted on his chest. Kyle avoided eye contact with everyone, and the general manager retreated to his office, where the envelope from Joshua still sat unopened on his desk. Even the regulars noticed. The atmosphere had shifted subtle, but heavy, like the silence after an argument that no one admits happened. In the break room, Maria sat with the envelope in her hands. She hadn't opened it yet. Her fingers trembled not with fear, but with disbelief. A scholarship no one had ever even remembered her birthday at this job. And yet a stranger humiliated, ignored, judged had chosen her as a symbol of hope. She finally peeled the flap open. Inside, a handwritten note to the one who saw, but stayed silent. "This is your chance to never be afraid again. When you graduate, the door is already open. Walk through it. J. Lang." Her eyes welled with tears. She didn't realize the head chef had entered until he cleared his throat. "You okay?" he asked gently. Maria nodded slowly. He saw everything, and he still gave everything. The next morning, the email started. Corporate. Joshua hadn't wasted time. An internal memo was sent to every Delacroix location across the country. Subject line: "The culture we hire is the culture we build." It told the story briefly, calmly, factually. It didn't name names, but it named values. "We don't serve plates. We serve people. And if our people can't do that with dignity, they don't belong here." By noon, over 20 restaurants were holding emergency staff meetings. New codes of conduct were being printed. Quiet conversations were happening between managers and their teams. In one location, a server asked, "Was that guy really the owner?" His manager nodded. "Hez, more than that. Hez watching now." Back at Maison Delacroix, the fallout was growing. Kyle was called into a meeting that lasted 12 minutes. When he walked out, he was no longer wearing a name tag. He passed Maria in the hallway, said nothing, and left the building without looking back. The maitre d', shaken and defensive, tried to appeal his removal. "I've worked here for years. We have standards. There's a difference between inclusion and disruption." The GM, now under pressure himself, simply said, "You didn't lose your job because he was rich. You lost it because you were wrong." That afternoon, Maria stood in front of the restaurant before her shift. A man approached a stranger, mid-40s, holding a notepad and camera. "Are you the girl he gave the scholarship to?" She hesitated. "How do you know that he smiled?" "Word travels. I write for the city paper. We'd like to do a story not about the mistake, but about the moment." Maria thought for a long second, then shook her head. "Tell it about him, not me." Meanwhile, across the city, Joshua Lang sat in a quiet apartment overlooking the bay. No headlines, no interviews. He didn't need validation. Eli, sipping coffee nearby, broke the silence. "So was that what you wanted?" Joshua considered the question. "I didn't go there for revenge," he said. "I went for confirmation. Confirmation of what Joshua looked out the window, toward the horizon. That the world still judges people by the wrong standards, and that one act of quiet dignity can still cut through all the noise." He picked up a leather journal from his table and flipped it open. Inside were pages filled with names, stories, moments. Under one section titled Final Lessons, he added a new entry, Maison Delacroix Lesson Nestor 47. "The most dangerous prejudice is the kind that dresses in professionalism. It smiles while it dismisses you. It shakes your hand, then seats you by the kitchen. The cure is not policy, it's perspective. And, sometimes, it takes being looked down on to remind people what looking up should really mean." That evening, Maria returned to work, but everything was different now. She felt seen. Other staff nodded at her respectfully. A few even apologized. The new interim manager woman flown in from another branch welcomed her with a warm handshake. We read his note. She said, "He was right to believe in you." Maria smiled, her heart still unsure how to carry the weight of hope so sudden and powerful. The final guest that night was a woman in a wheelchair, arriving with her husband. The hostess hesitated for a moment. Then Maria stepped forward. "I'll take care of them," she said. She guided them to the best seat in the house by the window, under soft lighting, with the ocean view behind. No assumptions, no hesitation, only dignity. 3 days later, a post went viral. It wasn't a photo, not a video, just a short paragraph, typed, anonymous. "I watched a man in a wheelchair get seated by the kitchen last weekend. I saw the staff whisper. I saw the way they treated him. I thought he looked out of place. But then I saw what happened next. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw a fit. He just showed us who he was. And in that moment, I realized who I wasn't." The post exploded. Comment after comment. "I've done this before. Judged someone too fast. This hit hard. Respect should never be conditional. He didn't come to be seen. He came to reveal." Within 48 hours. The final lesson was trending across platforms, not because people were outraged, but because they were quieted. Something about the story peeled back a layer of society that people usually left untouched: the polite prejudice, the silent hierarchies, the assumptions dressed in customer service smiles. Meanwhile, Joshua Lang stayed off social media. He didn't need to watch it happen. He'd already lived it. At another Delacroix location, a young server named Thomas had just finished reading the memo his manager printed out. He looked around at his team, a mixed group of students, part-timers, and dreamers. "We don't have to wait for the boss to test us," he said. "We already know what the right thing is." From that day forward, they made a pact. No one gets the kitchen corner. No one gets the cold face. Everyone gets dignity. Back at Maison Delacroix, Maria was learning how fast a quiet girl could become a leader. Customers recognized her now, not for a uniform, but for presence. Even on her break, she sat with the cleaning staff, the interns, the delivery drivers. "You belong here," she'd say, "all of you." And the tone of the place began to change, slowly but deeply. The laughter was still there, the clinking glasses, still elegant. But now, when someone walked in, dressed down, dressed odd, in a chair, with a cane, no one flinched, because someone had already paid the price for that shift. One night, near closing, the original manager, the one Joshua had removed, returned, not to cause a scene. He walked in quietly, hands in pockets. Maria spotted him, approached carefully. He looked older somehow. "Tough week?" she asked. He nodded. "I deserved worse." She didn't say anything. "I thought I was building class," he muttered, "but I was building walls." Maria didn't argue, didn't smile either, but she did ask. So now what he looked down, then handed her an envelope. Inside a simple card: "To the guest I overlooked, and the lesson I ignored. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't." Elsewhere, Joshua sat in a quiet park near the bay, the same place he used to go before the accident. Eli arrived with 2 coffees. "They're talking about you. You know," he said. Joshua raised an eyebrow. "They're calling you the quiet investor with the loudest lesson." Joshua chuckled. "Catchy." Eli smiled. "You don't like it? I didn't do it to be a symbol." "No," Eli replied. "But symbols don't choose to be symbols. People choose them." Joshua nodded slowly, and then he asked something he hadn't in months. "Think I should go back?" Eli blinked. "To where? To the world, the stage, the boardroom, all of it." Eli thought for a long moment. "Only if you bring this version of you." That night, Joshua opened his laptop. He pulled up a draft of a speech he'd abandoned months ago, a keynote he was once invited to give before the accident. He deleted it, started fresh, and typed the title, "What They Don't Teach You in Business School, the Table by the Kitchen." Back at the restaurant, Maria got a letter in the mail, an acceptance package, full ride, hospitality leadership. Starts next semester. She cried alone that night, but not because she was scared. She cried because someone she barely knew had believed in her more than most people she'd known her entire life. And across dozens of restaurants now under Lang Equity's umbrella, new posters went up, white background, minimal text, just one line. Respect, it's not on the menu, but it's what you'll be served. Underneath, small print, Lang Group Standards, 2025. Spring came early that year. The city stretched itself awake under a sky the color of calm, soft blue, streaked with golden clouds. Somewhere downtown, an auditorium buzzed with quiet energy. It wasn't a massive event. No red carpet, no flash photography. Just a modest gathering of business students, hospitality leaders, and a few curious strangers. They had come for a speaker most of them hadn't heard of until recently, Joshua Lang, a man whose name had appeared in headlines not for controversy or celebrity, but for something strangely rare in the world of power dignity. Backstage, Joshua sat in his chair, hands folded, eyes closed. He wasn't nervous. He had stood before crowds far bigger than this before the accident, but this was the first time since it all changed. Since the chair, since the silence, since the moment in the restaurant. Eli stood nearby, giving him space, like always. "You ready?" someone whispered. Joshua opened his eyes and nodded. He wheeled himself forward. The audience quieted as he rolled onto the stage. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at them. A sea of faces, some curious, some skeptical, some ready. Then he began. "A few months ago, I went to a restaurant. Not as an investor, not as a CEO, just a man, in a chair. I had a reservation, a name, a purpose. But what I didn't have apparently was the right appearance. Soft laughter in the crowd. I was seated near the kitchen. I was ignored. I was underestimated. And I watched not with anger, but with interest. Because what I learned that night was that professionalism without compassion is just polished cruelty." The audience leaned in. The staff judged me because I looked like someone who didn't belong. But the truth is, I've sat in every chair in that room. I've been the investor, the silent guest, the one who tipped big, and the one who got the worst table because he rolled in instead of walked in. Pause. And it'll tell you the most expensive thing in any restaurant isn't on the menu. It's kindness withheld. After the talk, a line formed. People wanted to shake his hand, ask questions, say thank you. But one moment stood out. A young man, no older than 20, stepped forward. Nervous, hands in pockets. He didn't introduce himself, just looked at Joshua with eyes that had learned something the hard way. "I was a server once," he said. "I think I might have treated people like they didn't matter." Joshua tilted his head. "And now I see them. All of them." Joshua reached out, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Then it worked. Weeks later, back at Maison Delacroix, a quiet shift was taking place. Maria, now assistant floor manager in training, walked the dining room with a poise no one had ever seen in her before. She checked each table, not just the tablecloths or the wine glasses. She looked at faces, at posture, at presence, at what wasn't being said. A woman with Down syndrome came in with her mother. A man with a stutter nervously ordered wine. A couple argued quietly at table 9, and Maria saw all of it. No judgment, just awareness. She had learned what power looked like, and it wasn't in expensive suits or chairs with wheels. It was in attention. One night, she received a call from Joshua. "I heard you turned down a promotion at another branch." He said, "I did." Maria replied, "Why? Because the lesson isn't finished here." Joshua paused, then said, "Neither is your story." That weekend, Maria received a package in the mail. Inside was a letter. "You taught me something I forgot, that sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that change everything. When you graduate, your job is waiting, but not just at the restaurant. You're going to train others, not just how to serve, but how to see. J.L." And beneath the letter, a silver pin. Minimal design, clean. Engraved with 3 words, "Lead with dignity." Across the city, in another restaurant, a man in a wheelchair rolled in. The hostess smiled, not out of pity, not as a performance, But as a welcome, she didn't know who he was, didn't care. She showed him to a table near the window. Warm light, soft music, a view of the street below. She didn't know she was part of the ripple. She didn't know the lesson had reached her too, but she lived it, and that was enough. We build buildings to impress people. We build businesses to profit from them. But the true mark of success is how we treat those with nothing to offer us in return, because one day, the person we overlook may be the one who teaches us everything we never knew we needed to learn. That was the final lesson.